Hello, everybody. It's Heather with the Leadership with Heart podcast. And today I have Tracey Barnes on here with me. I met him actually at a speaking engagement and was really taken just by his presence and his interactive nature when I was talking, and even after his warm kind of gesture towards me as it related to my story. And just thought I wanted to have you on here. I want to know more about you. And I think those on the show will also benefit from that too. So welcome, Tracey.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being here.
So where are you right now in your leadership journey? Tell everybody.
Oh man, that's a great question. I mean, I always feel like there's always more to learn, right? I have had some pretty significant roles in leadership over the last, I'd say, 15 years. Starting as a more of a technical leader, right? Where it's a bit of a different role as a leader, right? When you're a technician, my background's in IT, and that's how we met as our technology summit and such. But as a technical leader, there's a lot different perspective of what people are looking for from you versus when you're truly getting into organizational leadership. And there's not always that easy path to make that transition. And so I feel like I've done a great job of that. But still, at times, because there's that discipline that we all have built on of whatever our practice is that we have built our trade craft around, that you fall back into, okay, this is what I know as a technician versus what I've learned and what I feel I should be thinking about a little bit more empathetically, sympathetically, or emotionally with the individuals that I see that I am now getting an opportunity to be in front of and to kind of set vision and strategy for and such. So I think I've made a lot of progress over the last few years. I'm in charge of an organization now that has about 500 people. So it's a pretty big organization of team, but it has a much broader footprint that I have been asked to help kind of spearhead the future of technology for our state government here. And that looks at a number of different ways, right? It's not just tech leadership. There's some policy side, there's legislative, there's healthcare, there's transportation, there's all these pieces. And I'm still trying to understand where I start and where I stop. Where is that right balance with how do I put my personal opinion and perspective and experience to play versus understanding more of where things are going from the industry side of things, from policy side of things, and some of the different consumers and constituents across our state and how they utilize the various services that come from our agencies that I support and that we maintain. So I'm still learning. I always feel like there's an opportunity to learn and grow. I think I've been very blessed to have the ability. I spent a lot of years as a consultant, and the one thing I learned the most from being a consultant is you should spend more time listening than talking.
Isn't that right? So true.
And that can bridge outside of consulting as well. But definitely when you're trying to analyze and understand problems, spending more time listening than talking, and that has been very crucial in helping me understand my teams, the teams across the agencies, some of the teams where you deal with some of the policy and political side of things, and really where I need to be focusing my effort, my intention, my activities, and using that to help me set my strategy and vision for how I push my folks forward and such. But again, like I said, I'm always open to learn more and trying to figure out where I need to be going in this journey. What's next in that evolution? How do I continue positioning myself, because the evolution of our world continues to change and such. And so I always keep myself in that position of growing, but hopefully making progress.
Wow, that's a lot. I was just thinking through as you were talking about the core the position you're in, then the expanded kind of
Hmm.
responsibilities. It's probably because, well, you seem to have a lot of emotional intelligence into that, like awareness, like organizational awareness, and then how you stand in that space, and actually physically and not physically. Like I just think about that because you were like what, 6'9"? You're tall. Well, how tall are you?
About 6'4".
6'4". Oh my gosh, you felt much taller than that. I'm going to be honest, because I've got a son who's 6'3" and another one who's 6'2", and you felt taller than that. So I don't know, but thinking about like that presence, and oh my gosh, there's so many ways I want to go with this, but that the idea that you were given that expanded role, do you think obviously it was partial because you had that experience in the tech space, but if it's other things related to policy and almost like the relationship management perspective and the
Exactly.
process, and it's like it's much. Do you think that is because that whoever it was that kind of put you in that position, I'm assuming is it like the governor, or what's that
Correct.
role? Yeah.
Yeah.
Then the governor said, like, I recognize this person kind of has good emotional self-management. It's kind of like an objective thinker. It can bring people around the table. I'm imagining that's what he was seeing or she was seeing, because I'm not sure who the governor is
Yeah,
there.
that's exactly right. I mean, it started with a much broader conversation about where do you see the future at, right? Is not just, hey, I need someone. Our previous CIO had resigned and was moving on to the nonprofit space, and they could have really picked anyone to fill the shoes of just keep the lights on. You know what I mean? Let's just keep doing what we've been doing. But really, when we started having our conversations, it was a much broader perspective of how do we actually position our state to be a consumer and a strong advocate to technology to actually move our entire state forward. And
Yeah,
that's a much bigger conversation to have,
totally.
right? And that takes it out of, like you said, just being a technician. I want to make sure your email works and you can print,
Mhm.
and your desktop doesn't crash. But really, how do you engage citizens across the state from 7 million Hoosiers that are at various levels of capability that need a vaccine for COVID, that need unemployment because of layoffs? I mean, how do we make sure that they can actually get engaged? And so it's a very different conversation,
Mm.
and literally I do think I had been very well prepared by the look of the draw, or the plan of God, right? That none of us have any control over, and having been put in positions that really expanded my understanding outside of tech,
Mm.
of understanding folks at various levels of economic status, at various levels of education status, various levels of capability status, of ability status, and being able to be that collaborator to help non-technical people understand the technical needs in order to be that cohesive, fully rounded organization for everyone across our state.
Wow.
And we had some really serious conversations, because I had to ask myself, do I want to be that?
Mm.
And I think that's a big piece that I try to help folks see and hear and understand is, we're often pulled into directions, and they may sound great and they may be great opportunities. And sometimes we all even get caught up with the financial side and letting that be
Mhm.
the driver, right? But as an individual and as a person, do you see yourself being able to be successful and actually doing what you're being asked of?
Mm.
And so I had to ask myself those questions as well: is, do I want that much attention? Do I want that much authority, and do I want that much leadership? And am I ready for that? And does that work well with my family situation, my personal situation, my mental health as well as an individual? Because it can be pretty intense, that's for
Mm.
sure. There's always something going on, put it that way.
Oh, I would bet. And this is a really good conversation to be had as just those who are listening, as we're thinking about like being at different or reaching milestones in a career, and then being at certain turning points, and or tipping points for success, and going and stopping and pausing and saying, is this something I want? Does this
Yeah.
align with my values? Does this align with like where I want to be in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, whatever it is? And is it getting me there? Is it a stepping stone? Is it a milestone? What does this thing right now represent for me? And I love this idea of, do I want this too, from the sense of like it being a calling in a way? Like
Yeah.
obviously, like from your perspective, obviously I have the ability to be kind of the liaison or the conduit between like getting these tech people to understand what these people want and vice versa. And it's a great skill to have, and not a lot of people have that ability to be both understanding the tech side and speaking human. Right, and then and understanding the relationships between those. So but I kind of feel like, to that extent, because it is such a small amount of people, that it is kind of a calling. It's like, oh my gosh, like someone's got to do this.
Yeah.
Like this is, I
Yeah.
am obvious, like by the grace of God, I can do
Yeah.
this. Somebody's got to do it, and I guess it's me.
Yeah.
Uh, so I can see why that would be. I think about oh my gosh, right after George Floyd happened. So it was right after George Floyd. So before George Floyd, my company is Employee Fanatics. So we focus on listening to employees and workplace culture engagement. Okay, that's our main thing. And then post George Floyd, all of the clients that had hired us for the surveys, the roundtables, the listening sessions, the culture teams, like all the generalized listening inside the organization, now said, okay, hello, we need you now to talk to our marginalized groups. So now we need you to come in and like be, and okay, now, I mean, it was just, the demand got so high. And I was like you were saying, do I want to do this?
Right.
Do I want to be in this role? And at some point, I don't know when it was, I don't know exactly what happened, but finally I said, I think I got to state my opinion here. Like, I think I need to actually be more forward with this story, which is like the start of that story you heard, but I was not one that I actually led with before. I wasn't really something I did a whole bunch of, but it really became at the forefront where I said, I guess I'm called to be that like kind of like the conduit again. Like I kind of see both sides of different stories, and I can kind of, and asking myself, do I want to do it? And sometimes you don't want to do it, but you got to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, and you at least I do, right? I have that kind of epiphany every now and then, like, okay, if not me, then who? Right. And especially in some of the worlds that I operate in, if I say no, right, will they ask again? Or will there be another chance? Right. And so it's a lot that goes into that evaluation and that understanding of how do I go about addressing this, and how do I go about positioning myself to be, again, to be successful, but successful in a way that actually helps me bring forward, hopefully, progress, and create continued opportunities for others.
Oh, that's a very good point you make. I like that. It's some of that. There's a subtlety inside of that response, which for people in marginalized groups, those of color, particularly in your role in tech, it is going to be so rare for someone like you to be in your stature. And then it's like, how many other opportunities do we get, or will we get, or will someone like me get if I don't step up? So there's kind of a responsibility to that, and that's a hard place to be too. Totally hard place to be. I mean, where do you? Was that at all part of the discussion, or even was that a part of the wheels are turning in your head as you were thinking that through, that discussion with yourself or your spouse? Like,
that's always, unfortunately, it is. It's always part of that discussion. I have to think that through, and that's partially one of my downfalls, right? I'm sometimes over analytical, right? I feel like my brain operates like a computer at times. I'm trying to process and crunch everything. I want to get as much data as I can in to make the right informed decision and look at it from different angles. But there's nothing that takes that angle away. And at the end of the day, there's definitely that piece of, okay, if I get through all of the operational determination and calculation of what's the right thing to do, and am I prepared for this? Am I intelligent enough, or do I feel experienced enough and ready for this? And now there's that, okay, now how does that impact Tracey directly? And is Tracey at the right mental level for what's being asked and what's that calling is? And do I feel like I have myself prepared to be that voice for others, to help bring that message forward, and like I said, create additional opportunities and open more doors?
You've brought up a couple times, which I think is a real critical place, not one that, like, even probably 5 years ago you'd hear people talking about, which is the mental health side of things, which is just right in the forefront. And I'm sure the role you're in now, you're probably seeing how it has just eclipsed so much in these last years, probably even through COVID especially. So I'm curious to know, because in the role you're in and you're thinking about tech, do you have, like, within the leadership that you're in, is there something that you, not even just personally, but just kind of organizationally, ways that you feel like you're trying to skill up your team, your leaders, to be able to meet people where they're at in this mental health journey and crisis that we're kind of in right now at work? Because I know you have to be feeling it as being over the entire state of Indiana in this regard.
Oh yeah, I mean it's ingrained in a number of different capacities, right? There's us as individual leaders, right, in my management team, and making sure that they realize. I mean, so it's to your point. So I literally started this position March of 2020, which was exactly when the pandemic hit the state of Indiana specifically. It's when it kind of finally made it to the Midwest and we were sending everybody home. And so we had to quickly get everybody enabled for remote access and remote work and things of that nature. But I literally did not get a chance to meet the majority of my team in person for a while. And so you literally start to talk to folks and get them to understand and have very different conversations of how are you continuing to understand where your staff is at, and continue to make sure they're feeling a part of a team. How do you onboard new employees into a framework where they're likely not going to be coming into any specific location, but they still need to somehow build trust with partners and coworkers beside them? And on top of that, how do we make sure that we are there as our central services to our agency partners that are getting hit directly by citizens a lot more aggressively than we are, right? You know, my
Mm.
agency is not citizen facing, which is a blessing. Um, but the Department of Health is. I mean, and they're forefront and center with all of this, right? And same with even our Bureau of Motor Vehicles, and folks trying to keep a license renewed before they get in trouble, but they can't get into a BMV facility, right? So it's all of those dynamics that we literally have had to continue bringing our conversations back to, because it, like I said, with my world, it happens very easily where everyone starts looking like, okay, this is a technology problem, and a lot of times it's not.
Mm.
It is a person problem or a emotional problem or a mental problem,
Mm.
and really trying to understand what did we do to get here, and how do we make sure we find a solution that actually helps meet that person where they're at? You know, I'll give you one example. We had, again, a number of folks that were, you know, we finally found a way to reopen our BMV facilities to allow people to renew driver's licenses and registration of vehicles that had to come in and do paperwork because they couldn't do it online. And we tried to do a scheduling. So we created an online scheduling system for them to schedule an appointment. There's still 20% of our state that refused to do an online schedule and wanted to call and talk to somebody.
Mm.
That statistic actually worked very well for us in realizing that when we got ready to do online scheduling for COVID vaccines, we needed to make sure that we had phone lines available for that same 20%. And so you start thinking and realizing, again, this ain't about technology. We have people that are living and operating at various different levels of our society. And whether they're scared of technology, don't understand technology, or don't have someone in their life that can help them navigate the technology and tools that are out there, we have to be thinking about that. We have to be thinking about what experience do we want individuals to have and feel, and as government role, how do we make sure that everyone gets that same access, and that we're not doing things that exclude and preclude people. So user experience, customer experience, user engagement. I mean, these are all not just buzzwords, but really a way of life that as we talk about what we're doing from our tech side and standpoint, we're making sure our managers, our leaders, and our departments are thinking about that side of thing, both for the citizens that are out there and for even their employees and internal staff that are all seeing things differently because of a lot of that shift that the pandemic specifically brought us. I mean, and we're seeing it even still. I mean, it's amazing. I kind of go back and forth, right? That was a huge transformation of how we operate, the pandemic. That it really kind of made us all think differently. But we saw similar transformations when with the Russia-Ukraine war, and we're seeing them again with the Israel-Hamas war and the security concerns and the threats that start to come forward. It's all different pieces that people start looking at the tools and the media and the content information very differently. And we're having to adjust how we engage folks to get them to realize and understand where there's good information, where there's good output, where there's good understanding. How can they be protected and impacted? How do they still get access to the tools and solutions that they need, coming from our different government agencies?
I love the this conversation around there's two things I like. I love it's the personal side, so it's like the personal
Yeah.
human side of tech, which you already know that's like my thing. It's huge. And then I also love, it's another thing that's my thing, is that process view of it too. When we think of employee experience, a customer experience, user experience, like this whole journey, kind of going back to what I said to you earlier, is like we're in the leadership journey, and it's that same kind of thing where if we look at the user experience, the customer experience, citizen experience in this case, as a journey, and realize there's all these touch points, and how we can gauge their kind of happiness along the way. Most organizations and government, I worked in local government, big local
That's
government,
right.
and it's still we still couldn't quite get that right now into the corporate world. Not in every company, but in the larger companies, they kind of understand this idea of journey
Mm-hmm.
and kind of gauging and figuring out the touch points and all that. And it's just like being able to transfer that. So what do you do to, like, again, upskill the leaders, upskill your mindset, make sure even like the kind of coaching upward in the
Mm-hmm.
end about what kind of trends are happening in corporate world and how you can bring in like best practices, right? We talked about that even at the event. How are you bringing different concepts in that maybe weren't in government before, that actually could innovate, that could help move forward? How do you do that?
I think you hit the nail on the head, actually, and maybe not realizing it. It's private sector has a very significant role in our economy, and what I have really tried to do is continue to get government open to understanding how private sector works and where there's an opportunity for us to engage in similar fashion. So what has happened, at least in different organizations that I've been in, right? So I've been private sector, I've been public sector, I've been higher ed, I've been kind of all over the place. But what I've seen a lot of is, and there's not a negative to this per
Mm-hmm.
se, is, governments are, we all look to each other to how each other are doing things, and that's great, right? My neighbors here in Ohio and Michigan and Illinois, we talk all the time, because we have a lot of the same problems, and we're really not competitors.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we are really good partners and collaborators. But at the same token, government in general is still typically lagging behind how industry operates and how private sector moves forward. And like you said, they're very bottom line driven. Now we can't get to that level because we have to take care of constituents at various levels and such. I can't just say this costs too much, I'm not doing it anymore. If there's a need for it, I got to keep doing it. But I have partnered with a lot of private organizations to bring them in to talk to our folks and help them understand different ways of thinking and different ways of seeing those perspectives of, okay, yes, you do have the limitations of federal law and state law and regulations and guidelines that you have to meet. That doesn't mean you have to give up on standard process methodology. And how do you get yourself operating more like an engine, right? Is you look at the assembly line that came out of Ford in Detroit, right? That model, there's no reason we shouldn't be able to produce the same output 4 times in a row. And if we're not doing that, then we're missing out on some basic principles of operation.
Mm.
You look at some of the stories that come out of Chick-fil-A on the customer service side, right? You start bringing we've had book clubs, we've had webinars, we have speakers like you that have come into us to help us think about things, not just from the vacuum or the bubble of government that we can easily get caught up in thinking about, because a lot of these folks have been around here. 10 years is young in government, right?
Yes.
I mean, you
Yes.
get folks that are
Yeah.
retiring
They're
and
staying.
leaving at exactly for after 35 years of government service. So you have to keep exposing that fast pace, that quicker mentality, that different approach, thought leadership into the conversations, not just within my office, but even within some of the other agencies. We've had some other good agency leaders that have seen that and brought that outside perspective in to just get their folks to see and realize there is a different way of looking and thinking, and we don't have to let there's things we can do to not let the bureaucracy even hold us down, which it does. It's not just it the constituents ain't the only ones complaining about our bureaucracy. Even we are as well on the inside. But what can we do to help keep things moving forward and increase that level of quality that we're providing?
I love that. Yeah, all the things are sweet. Some of the things that we talked about when I was there, with the larger group, and some of it I completely know because at a short period of time, very young in the local government space, it was super obvious that there were some limitations and a lot of them in our heads. And I'm
Bingo.
always like, let's break ourselves out of it. Like, why? I'm gonna ask that question all the time, right? Why do we have to?
Exactly.
Why?
I've said it's like we are walking around with mental handcuffs. And there's so many times I've talked to folks on my team and other teams, and they're like, Well, why are we doing that? Well, governor said so. Which governor?
Oh, that's a good one.
And there's been times when it was, two governors ago. I'm like, all right, yeah, I think we can adjust.
I'm pretty much not going to follow their lead anymore. So let's move on past that point. Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it so much. So obviously we can hear that you have a lot of emotional intelligence. You have a lot of heart. There's an awareness. You have all those great pieces. Is there ever a time when you can think of that maybe you weren't like so proud of your leadership? You didn't show up with as much care as you seem to express from a very strategic way of doing it now. Can you think of a specific time and maybe share that story with us? And then what did you do, of course, to kind of like what happened to help you evolve or come out of that time?
The one thing that really jumps out to me, and this may take a little bit to get to, try to speed the story up a little bit here. My previous role, I served as chief of staff for a lieutenant governor here in Indiana. And there's nothing that prepares you for that role, no matter where you're at what level. I mean, it's a very different world, and you're really truly getting into the core of politics and such. I wouldn't say I don't know if I would say my leadership wasn't ready. I know my confidence definitely was not. And it was, again, because, outside of when you're watching, Madam Secretary or Veep or House of Cards, what does the chief of staff do? And what is that role about? And what am I supposed to be focused on? And I definitely came into that position really more trying to figure out what is it that I need to really make my priorities, and how do I protect my elected official more than anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I had to do a lot of soul searching and deep digging and diving, a lot of prayer with my wife, and helping try to make sense of some of the different things that I was seeing and dealing with. In Indiana, our lieutenant governor oversees about 5 state agencies, and so I ended up essentially being, from a private sector standpoint, a COO over their operations.
Mm.
With a bit of a political twist to it, of course, right? Because there's that elected office that's there. Um, and it really was a matter of, the light bulb finally going off that, okay, first and foremost, Tracey, you're here for a reason. You were handpicked to be here and asked to be here. So even if you're not believing in yourself right now, someone else has believed in you to put you in this position, and your voice matters. And those are 3 things that I constantly come back to, even in this role here, is you're here for a reason. Someone picked you to be in this position, and your voice matters. And so it took a few months for me to really kind of get my feet underneath me, in both understanding the demands and needs of the office and the elected official, but also the operational needs of those 5 agencies, and of course building their trust, building a relationship, and spending some pretty intimate time with them, being transparent and vulnerable with, hey, look, I'm not here to do your job. I'm here to understand your job and figure out if there are roadblocks that I can help move out of the way to help you guys move your mission forward. Because there were some very specific areas that those agencies that I had no background in, right? One was rural affairs, one was agriculture, one was tourism. I'm from the city of Detroit, right? So not worlds that I've operated in. But we ended up having some significant meetings with me and those 5 agency heads, that really kind of ripped the layers of the onion off and helped us get to some real core understanding of each other, and of some of the goals and needs that they wanted to accomplish. And I was able to become a strong advocate for them, as well as a strong leader to help push them forward as well. And in that same capacity, like I just talked about, brought in outside individuals to help them think about some things differently and expand their potential, even ideas and thoughts and concepts of, things that they saw as possible, and what's beyond that possibility, right? We have a pretty significant agriculture footprint here in Indiana, and some strong agricultural leaders, and let's get them to the table, and let's hear from industry what they are seeing, and where the state is being either a roadblock or a barrier, or we can make some adjustments. How do we move things forward from that side? And it took a lot of me, being vulnerable and asking others, help me understand what I don't understand, help me understand what I'm missing, help me understand where I can probably push more, but still have to be delicate, right?
Mhm.
Those were all some significant learning lessons that hit me pretty hard because keep in mind I had come out of being the expert technician and I didn't have to ask anybody anything.
Mhm.
So confidence was I'd say at an all-time high and probably higher than it needed to be, right? um into holy cow, what am I doing and where am I at and where am I going with this?
It was just the experience that kind of had that got you through it. The experience, just going through it, you just had to go through kind of that tougher time to gather more belief in yourself to be able to just go through it, basically.
That's exactly right. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. And that realization of we all know and understand more than we realize. You know what I mean? We've all had various different life experiences that have prepared us for things that we don't know we've been prepared for.
Yeah.
You know,
Hmm.
we kind of pick a path, we pick a discipline, we pick a degree, we pick a career path and such, and we think that that's where we're supposed to be. Um, the fact that I had consulted at probably 40 different universities and government entities over the last 20 years, I didn't realize how much I had retained in visiting those different jurisdictions to make sense of different things as they
Hmm.
started coming up in that new role. Um, and it started surprising people that I knew things that they didn't know I knew. And to be honest with you, at times I didn't realize I knew because I never prepared to be in that role. It was just part of my experience. Even from a technology standpoint, right? Is understanding some there was a tech project that was going on at the federal Department of Agriculture that I had been involved in, and so when I'm working with our state Department of Agriculture and they're trying to explain something to me and I start kind of spitting it back to them about this different pieces and they're looking at me confused and I'm looking at them confused. Like, wait a minute, we're talking the same stuff and we know what each other's talking about. It was an experience that Lord knows I was not thinking I would ever retain and hold on to and provide some value down the road, but lo and behold it was there. And it helped with reinforcing that trust of, even though I was still sitting there saying, I'm trying to understand what you guys are doing, I do have a foundation and a framework to build from. And if you'll work with me, I'll work with you and we'll get there together. And we absolutely did.
Wow. That's crazy. That's what a journey. Well, I think
That's
that
exactly.
you step into the place you're supposed to be. I believe that so strongly that whatever you're doing, and if you're doing it and you're loving it, especially you're doing it well, even if it's ups
Hmm.
and downs, you're like it's a calling. It's a calling. And I know people. For I think for most they may feel a little uncomfortable that I use that language. I was thinking about my I think it was my last book. Was it it was either that or the Art of Carrying Leadership book, where there was one of the reviewers said. I feel like some of the language is religious in here or something like that. It's because I use that word like calling, or I
Sure,
use these kind
sure.
of words right in it without even necessarily specifically stating it. And I thought, well, I mean, that's going to be your issue. I'm not taking that out because who I am, right? And so you're either going to like it or you're not. And so I
Right.
love the fact that you kind of bring that into some of the discussion, because I think we are whole people, and it's hard to you can't just carve that out. We
Yeah.
try to, like, in both of our spaces, it's all a very
Uh-huh.
whole interesting mix. So we got to really, we have to watch out. Yours is much larger, mine's kind of in a different way, right? And I think this idea of just showing up as us, come as you
Hmm.
are, type of thing is kind of a critical part of, I think, happiness. The happiness of both where customers are, or citizens are, all of them responding to us responding to them. Same thing would be with employees and those in our teams.
Hmm.
So you just the way you talk about that, it makes me think of how important that is. So, for those who are listening right now, what might be a couple pearls of wisdom you'd leave them with? That would be, maybe they could be at a crossroads in their leadership. They could be just, you've already, I think, provided quite a bit to be thinking about, but it could be they may be looking for, motivation to get through the next week. What might be a couple things as you think of leadership at heart would be good tips to send them on their way?
I think the big one, kind of the last piece that I just touched on there is that self confidence and self awareness, right? It is paramount to any of our success. I mean, you don't get folks that are successful in leadership because they've been shy and timid and holding back. I mean, it's the recognition, but again, there's always that balance because you don't want to be too boisterous and obnoxious either, right?
Yeah.
There's that balance with how do I make sure that while I know what I know, I'm also very willing and comfortable saying I know what I don't know.
Mm.
Um, I will never be apologetic. My religious foundation is part of my journey, right? I mean, that's definitely something that has given me the confidence and comfort to know that and a lot of the confidence specifically around that is if I fail in the sense of man, that doesn't mean I've failed in the path that God has put me on. And so literally there's nothing for me to be afraid of. There's nothing for me to hold back on. I don't need to be disrespectful. I don't need to be overt with my thoughts and opinions. But I can be very direct in how I go about putting forward expectations, goals, responsibilities, requirements, requests, and in doing so to hold people and organizations and entities accountable to make sure we're getting the outcome and output of what we're trying to march towards. So that confidence in knowing that I know this is the right path, this is what I'm going to put out there and expect and ask for, and this is what I'm going to hold people to, and I'm going to also say hold me to this as well, so that my part is delivering, and that I'm not part of the problem. That confidence becomes so crucial in not feeling like as an individual you're not prepared, you're not capable, and you're an individual failure because of that overall footprint that you're trying to be successful in.
Mm.
um, I don't get everything right all the time, there's no doubt, but definitely that doesn't stop me from going and doing the next project and taking on the next initiative and taking on the next topic, because I know it's the right thing to do.
Mm.
So confidence is a big one. It's the one thing I preach to my kids pretty aggressively is if you don't believe in you, no one else will believe in you.
Mm.
And so how do you make sure that you have some level of understanding and expectation from yourself that you can continue to present and exude to others, to make them feel more comfortable and confident and trusting more in you, and you getting more out of life around that. Um, the other big piece I always say, which is what I said at the beginning, is never stop learning. Again, that comes back to that confidence, but not arrogance. I know a lot. I know I've done a lot. I've seen a lot. I've lived a lot. I've been in 30 different states and lived overseas for about a year, helping stand up computer systems and things of that nature in different cultures and organizations, structures and such. There's always something new to be learning. And so continue having that for one, that open mind to hear and see things, especially as in my world, technology is changing every single day. So for me to be closed off would never benefit me in any capacity, nor would it benefit the people that are relying on me to keep being a future leader around technology. Um, so I'm constantly looking for opportunities to really kind of keep my mind open, but also being hungry and going out and finding and identifying things that I need to fill gaps on within myself that I know have been problematic, or I've fallen short on, or I feel like I need to bridge a gap on, and increase my knowledge and increase my understanding and capabilities. That's been a big one. I'll give a quick synopsis and story of, the worlds of technology and law are starting to really collide. And so because policy is starting to try to regulate technology and things of that nature, I knew nothing about law, outside of watching Judge Mathis shows on TV. You know what I mean? But literally, so I went and got a master's degree in cybersecurity law and policy just to get me some understanding so I can feel more comfortable in that conversation
Nice.
and in that realization. I went out and sought that and made that a priority and made that a focus. And has proven very valuable to me in this role. But more than that, it actually showed a lot of my team that I knew I didn't know everything.
Mm.
And I encourage that continued professional development and that continued growth and expansion. And not a lot of people think about, well, you're in tech, why do you want to go learn law? There's a big need for it, but more than anything you do involves tech. I mean, if somebody wanted to go and get an MBA in my team right now, I'd say go get it, because tech is influencing business. If you want to go get a master's in horticulture, tech is influencing the growth of trees and the tracking of all all of our society on that side. So
Yes.
it's there's nothing that really becomes off limits. And so if there's a passion for something, but also in your side an acknowledgement that you feel you don't have the background or expertise or knowledge in, go get it. Keep learning, keep expanding your mind and opening yourselves up to different perspectives and new tools. And that way you can, more importantly, you can continue to stay relevant.
I love that. The message I was hearing towards the end was that increasing your competence increases your confidence.
Yeah.
And being a continual learner, being open to realizing you don't know everything is the biggest part. And then secondarily, holding both you and others accountable to that higher standard. And just so I think that sets the mark. Boy, what that's a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot of good boost, at least for the brains. I'm hoping for those who are listening now, you got a lot out of it. Tracey, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you saying yes to coming on here.
Yeah, I was very surprised when you reached out and asked me. And we had a real great interaction when you were here speaking for us, and the team loved the presentation that you gave on the workforce development and workforce engagement, which I appreciated you being there for that. So when you reached out, there was no question as to just figuring out, okay, when can we do it, and what do you want me to talk about? But thanks again for having me. I'm very excited to be a part of your platform and your audience, and acknowledging and considering me something of value to be heard. So I appreciate that.
Oh, of course. Absolutely. You have graced me with your presence. So again, thank you so much. And thanks everybody for listening to the Leadership with Heart podcast too. Be well.